No, the best measure for of an artwork's worth is how important it is to us as an individual and how it speaks to us personally. And I think it's been the big journey for me over my whole art making career is to learn to stop making it for an audience. And this lesson so many times, which means maybe I haven't learned it.
You're a passionate creative, and so are we. Join me, Brie Stockwell, and my podcast partner, Len Metcalf, as we navigate the ups and downs of living creative lives while teaching you how to do it too. Time to pull back the curtain on our creative affair.
Testing. 1, 2, 3, testing. Hello, are you there? Brie, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm good now. I forgot to check if it was recording off my good mic. Otherwise, it would sound like this. It's all good.
You sound great, Brie.
Thanks. So do you.
Do you know, though, that sounding great is a little bit subjective, isn't it?
That's such a great segue, Len.
Or is it objective? I don't know.
No, it's totally subjective. In fact, I'm kind of I consider myself kind of picky on the kind of audio I listen to. And so when I get audiobooks, like I downloaded this one audiobook and hang on a second. It's called The Gentle Art of Blessing. Someone told me about it. It's actually a really great book. But the audio version, I wanted the audio version to sound gentle. like someone is taking you through a gentle experience, right?
And what did it sound like, Brie?
Instead, it sounded like this. I can't even it was strained and hoarse. And I feel like the voice I'm making is worse, but then it really is. But even still, I could not handle it. So very subjective, because I think some people wouldn't care and they would just listen because they'd rather just listen to audio. So
I had to go through a couple of mics till I found one that made my voice sound the way that I think it should sound like and that I actually loved the sound of. And I had to love my own voice to be able to do what we're doing today.
Nice. Yes. And I know that some people prefer, I think it also depends. Do you prefer a brighter, higher voice? I actually prefer a lower voice. I like listening to podcasts and books and things like that where people are talking in a lower register. And so probably that's why I do some stuff to beef up my bass on this and anyway. So because I kind of like a little podcast, deep podcast voice,
I find a low, deep, sexy voice very, very, very exciting, stimulating. We know what we're talking about here. It's I find it erotic, and it's seducing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Takes you on a little adventure.
so my preference also comes back to me in what I would like to sound like, as also as to my preference of listening. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, totally. Totally. You know what I think is really fun? I think it's fun to experience things in person with people. And I think on a recent episode, I mentioned going to a photography exhibit, and both my friend and I, we were both like, oh, she would be like, I love this one. I'm like, yeah, I can see its good qualities, and I would say, oh, I really love this one. And maybe she was drawn to it or not. And some of them we were both you could feel the energy when we both loved the same one. And I just think it's so interesting. It doesn't matter. That's why it's so fun. It doesn't matter what it is. Everyone's going to appreciate different kinds of art, different kinds of voices, different, and not even just different. I prefer different kinds of paintings. I like the really, really subtle, the Haystack series from, I think it's Monet. And is it Monet or Van Gogh? Shoot, I really should know my
Monet.
artists.
They're the
Yeah,
subtle ones.
I know, and the colors in there are just fabulous, and I actually see that coming across in my work. But some people would look at it and be like, "Ah, meh, bored."
Although he is in the canon of art, so he's considered by the powers to be that of to be one of the masters of the art world. At, and this is what we're talking today about, folks, is subjectivity in art. And I hope you picked that up already, that we're talking very much about how art is such a subjective thing rather than an objective thing. When I was young, Brie, I had trouble with those two words, getting clear as to what they meant. Maybe you could help me revise that. Objective means and subjective means.
Oh, um, well, I think I would have to look up the definition. Let's
Oh,
just pause for a minute
I'll,
and do that. Here we go. Not influenced by personal feelings or opinions in considering and representing facts. Yeah. I love that they say this. Here's what I want to say right now. I love that they say not influenced by feelings or opinions because so often we all just have different kinds of emotions that arise for us when we listen to different music. Oh my gosh, think about the spectrum of music that exists out there, like the whole huge spectrum. It's crazy, right? And that's because so many different people like so many different kinds of things, right? So, um, and of course, subjective is influenced by personal feelings, tastes, or opinions, right? So it's all it's does it is it influenced by feelings or opinions or is it not? Is it more factual, right? And I
I
think
always
sometimes
start
what's interesting is as
a
artists,
presentation when I've judged an art prize with a bit of a lecture about art being subjective,
mm,
and that uh, you've paid me or asked me to judge for my opinion, and I hope that you actually disagree with me and have a different opinion, because that's what the whole point about art is, that it communicates with each of us very, very, very differently, and that we all have our own winners and favorites and the ones that we love, that is incredibly different to the expert's opinion or to the canon of art or to um, what is good taste or not. It's such a subjective thing. And all art is subjective.
it's even interesting. Like I just entered a competition and
Uh,
received my results back. And it's so interesting because I can see the scores from each of the judges and they're all different for the same photograph. And I just find that so fascinating that even for one image, people can have different opinions or feelings about it. And it varied based on my photograph too. It is really fascinating though that the images that I thought were the best were judged by like really well or high got high marks from some judges and very low marks from other judges. And I just think this is so interesting within the art world that no one like we have there's so many people in the world and no one is going to think or feel the same about their own work or your work.
it's fascinating that on one person says this is beautiful and the other one says it's not, and then the next one it can be actually the polar opposite. And then
Mm.
I'm also guessing that some sort of wavered in the middle pretty consistently um, across all of them. Uh, I had a recent judging experience where I was working with three judges, um, uh, judging quite a prestigious photographic award, the Mullins Contemporary Photography Award, with a $30,000 prize. So, and in a major regional gallery, it's a very, very big and important competition in Australia. It's actually the equal most financial one in Australia as well. And we have three judges, and it came down to looking at different works. And I remember standing in front of the works, and one of the judges is going, "This is one that could, in my opinion, could be a winner." And my immediate reaction was, "No way." And I had this incredibly strong polar opposite reaction to the same artwork. And um, that was absolutely fascinating. And so our judging process was actually about, between the three judges, as to finding the one that spoke to all three of us, as a rather than sort of, a voting sort of thing. We worked really, really hard to find the one that all three of
I
us
also
could get
think that's
excited
interesting
about.
because do you find that this is what I think too, my taste change depending on if I'm hungry or depending on my mood, um, the time of day, the season. Do you think your decision might have been different had you been feeling a different way? Had it been a different season, a different day? What do you think?
Well, I hope that I continually grow and change over time, and that my opinions keep changing and becoming more attuned and better developed and more understanding, I think, of the artwork. Um, but I tried to mitigate that by doing it over 3 days of going in, looking, leaving, going back in, spending a whole day looking and looking around, and then um, doing it again. And it was that allowing time to help me um, modify and change um, my opinions, and to make sure that I wasn't being swayed by
Mhm.
initial
Yes, agreed.
feelings, which are important, but you know, you might be dragged to something because of that moment of, oh, I'm feeling a bit sad at the moment, and I'm really drawn to that one because it's actually amplifying my sadness and helping me process what's going on.
Or even the opposite, like I'm feeling sad and so I'm drawn to something that's really happy because I wanna change my mood or whatever, so who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or I've never seen that before, or um, I'm feeling really political today,
Mm,
and I want to. This is the issue that's the most important one in my head. Or, hey, look, this artwork, this issue is so important for the world at the moment. Why am I not considering that issue um, higher up in my judgment? So by revisiting time over time, I was allowing myself to try and wrestle through who I am and my reactions to them, and to see whether they were real and enduring, because it's the enduring reaction that I want, that it keeps pulling me back, and I want to keep looking at it, and I want to keep understanding it, and I want to be engaging with it on such a long period of time. So time really helped me
that's
work
such a
my
smart
way
way to do it.
through that process.
They were right to have you judge. Mhm.
I use my memory, like I'll look through like when I've got a huge selection, I look through them and very carefully, and then I'll put them aside, and then I'll actually mentally open the folder again and ask myself which one comes to my memory. And then as I'm flicking through, it's like, oh, yeah, that one, that's right. I had a reaction to that one yesterday and I still have it. Or, oh, that one's speaking me today. I didn't really notice that one yesterday. And I skipped through this one yesterday. What happens if I give that a little bit more attention? Does that um,
I think this
change
is
how I
really
feel about
helpful
it?
for us to talk through because I think so often, I think like I could look at my work that I submitted to this competition and think, oh, these judges or these images didn't get high enough marks, so they must not be good or good enough, or I could think lesser of them. I think that is part of the dangers. The dangers of the fact that art is so subjective is because sometimes we think it's objective. And I don't know why we do. I think just sometimes we're like, oh, that it didn't get picked, so it must not be good. And that's just not true. That's just not true at all. And I'm wondering how we can change the conversation about this more in the community because, um, you know, there are always going to be competitions, right? There always will be. Um, but just because your work, your art, whatever it is, didn't get chosen to win doesn't mean it's that it's not good or there's something wrong with it inherently. And that's just not true. And I think, when we enter a competition, we have this idea in our minds that somehow these judges are going to tell us what our art is worth. Yeah, it's not a measure of its worth at all.
That's exceptionally dangerous. No, the best measure for of an artwork's worth is how important it is to us as an individual and how it speaks to us personally. And I think that's been the big journey for me over my whole art making career is to learn to stop making it for an audience. And I've learnt this lesson so many times, which means maybe I haven't learned it, but I feel like it's come up in my life multiple times in my life, and I've been talking about it for a very, very long time, but I still forget it. And I still come to my work and I feel disappointed when other people don't like it and it doesn't do well, or um, the judges or other people don't see its value or its worth. And I feel really internally disappointed and let down that publicly it doesn't receive the recognition that I feel that it deserves. And but I'm totally wrong in letting that
Mm.
influence me or steer me. I need to let that go, and it keeps coming back up. So it's my issue. I need to try, and I'm when I'm making the art, I'm actually lost in just making it and having giggles to myself and go, "Oh, that's really beautiful," and "Oh, I finally got that," and "I love that," and "Oh, that's so gorgeous," and "Isn't that sweet?" And what I do with it and how I show it is the part that needs to be modified and played with, um, too, to keep maintaining this point that it's really important that it's me that gets the biggest reward and has the biggest reaction for it. You just can't trust the opinion of others. I'd like to share an example with you, Brie, because I th- this is one also to do with a photographic competition.
Wait, hang on a second. I want to pause just for a minute. So you have pause. We're going to listen to Len's example, but I just want to I just want to point out something here that you said, which is that there's two parts to this. Like you make the art, and it feels really amazing. Like that's a really beautiful thing, right? You didn't make it for somebody else. You just made it for you. It wasn't like, oh, going to try and impress some judges somewhere. I think that's awesome. I think that's personally, my subjective opinion is that I think that's a great reason to make art. Like that's why I make my photographs, right? And if I decide that I have photographs that I want to enter into a competition, then I do. But you said two parts. Um, one is that you get disappointed when others don't see it like you want them to, right? So that's one side. And then two, you said you need to work on not letting it influence you. And I think you can do both. I think it's still okay to be disappointed that you made this thing that you personally think is beautiful and someone else doesn't appreciate it like you. I think that's okay. I think it's okay to be like, "That's a real bummer. You guys don't see it." It's just in how totally. But it is just in how long you wanna sit with that. And then you have to choose if you can see it, then you can choose whether or not that influences you in the future. And so I think when you're feeling disappointed about it, you have all of these choices in front of you. Do you want that to influence how you make work in the future? I'm going to say, no, you don't. You probably just end up forgetting it and go back to the stuff that you love anyway. Right. But some of us, and I've done this work so that it doesn't influence me, but so because I don't want it to. And then some of us allow that disappointment to influence us. And so that we change. And that's not the place I wanna be, and I don't think that's the place that you wanna be, but I don't see you doing that, Len. I see you like, "I'm disappointed, and that's okay, but I'm not gonna let it influence me." I think you live in that space where it's still really great. I just think you don't like being disappointed.
Yeah, I've learnt very much that not to block out the feelings, but to actually sit with them and work through them, and then come out the other side, and then, right, okay, and off you go again, and yeah, maintain
Yes.
that that original spark and that drive still has to be there, and you keep going for it. And yeah, I love not giving a fuck about what people think about my work or me, but deep down I do have quite a strong sense of wanting to be acknowledged and wanting to be seen as doing beautiful art. And when I do get that incredibly beautiful feedback that people say, "My God, your art's incredible," I just melt. And I'm a bit of a, I love a bit of positive feedback, and it's a really magical thing to explore and to enjoy when it comes.
Yes, and because we know that art is so subjective, not everyone is gonna give you that feedback, but it's really beautiful and you accept it when it comes, and sometimes you're disappointed. I think disappointment for me is more like, "Oh, you don't see how great this is. I'm so sorry for you." You just don't see it. That's a bummer. So, okay, now on to your example. I just wanted to point that out. That's just an interesting space to live in and to play with. And how do you, when you feel disappointed, how do you deal with it, and what do you do with it? I think is you can definitely ask yourself questions. Do you want to care? Do you want to not? What do you want to do? Okay, your example. Go ahead. Did you remember?
Before we do that, we could also one day
Mm,
we could talk about what happens when you feel disappointed with your own work. And I think that might be a whole episode for
mhm,
us to explore, because that's a bit of a rabbit hole too. And it seems to be my most important
mm,
issue that I work with my students and clients over the years is their own self-doubt and disappointment in their own work. So, yeah, I think Brie and I have been talking about that over the last few years in this podcast
mhm.
consistently. This relationship that we have with our own work. It's beautiful,
Yeah.
and worth
I shut up.
exploring.
Did you see how great I shut up?
Oh, my story.
I
My
stopped talking for
story.
you, Len. The floor the floor
Oh,
is yours.
thank you. I'm so appreciative of that. I recently judged um, a competition for the United Nations for the environment, and s- I think it was five or four, three, maybe very prestigious judges. I was very proud to be on the floor with them, actually judging, and it was all done by numbers. So I didn't get to meet them and talk to them, which is rather unfortunate. I would have loved to have rubbed shoulders with such famous people, and so proud to be there. But the judges made their decision, and um, the photographs were then put out into the public for the public to make a decision. And the marks were divided percentage wise between the so called experts, who I'm so proud to be of, and I'm
Mm.
smiling there, and public opinion. And I think it was a 30-70% split, but of the weight. Anyway, we looked at I personally had a really close look at the marks, and uh, one had thousands and thousands and thousands of um, votes, upvotes, and the ones that the judges had chosen only had a handful. And um, I questioned the ethics of this. I also questioned you know, was someone smart enough to set up a bot that just voted for themselves? Uh, did they have a huge social media following that they could
It
then,
becomes a popularity contest for sure. I've seen these, you
yeah.
know.
So
Yeah, interesting.
the bottom line is the one that came last in the judge's esteemed opinion came first because of the popular opinion. And um, this is a really fascinating thing that social media and popular opinion is quite a mediocre opinion, and it's easily manipulated. We can't actually trust it. I actually think that social media and popular opinion drags down. Uh, I'm just trying to think of the right word there, but it,
It kind of erases I think what you're saying is it panders social media panders to the immediate, wow factor, and it negates these, um, the art that is more subtle in nature, that takes a minute to stop and appreciate. Uh, and and that really is too bad because there's a lot of art out there that is more subtle, but also more rich and more complex and needs a second or 10th look to really understand what's happening. And I think a lot of artists that create this kind of work that needs the extra looking or the extra consideration, they're probably not like in the popular opinion, so they're not going to get like more than a handful. And that's just really too bad because their work is probably better. And that's an opinion. That's my subjective opinion about it.
the word I was looking for, Brie, was mediocrity.
Yeah.
Social
Mhm.
media creates mediocrity, and it's interesting that I've been having this conversation about AI as well, and AI is also creating mediocrity. It's this really low average um, background noise that is so prevalent in the world that isn't the really inspiring creativity that's right out there on the edge. That does push our subjective thoughts and uh, is really fascinating and is really, really beautiful. And like, I think one of the interesting things about studying art history is, all art movements throughout history, well, not all of them, but quite a huge, large number of them were often disliked by the status quo, by, you know, society when they first came. And then it's only years later that they were celebrated. Like uh, Van Gogh is just it's a very simple example. Yes, he was had a little bit of success in his lifetime, but he's now considered one of the greatest painters in the whole world. Um, and that wasn't seen at the time of his painting. And there's so many art movements like that that the the general world didn't really see or understand this new directions that people were pushing into.
So, are you saying that if people don't really appreciate our work right away, we're actually going to be world famous when we die? I'm just kidding.
That's a little secret dream.
Len, you're already world famous. Look at you and you're judging. I think sometimes we need these reminders like, yeah, we're doing great. And where are we seeking that? And I think that's why this conversation about subjectivity is so interesting. It's because sometimes we use other people's opinions to help us decide if it is good or not, right? And so, or if how well are we doing in the world, and if we want to be more well known, it's kind of frustrating when those two things, what the world wants and what we create, don't mesh well. But that doesn't mean you change your art, though. What do you do? What do you do when you're in that situation where you create one way and the majority of the world doesn't really see it? What is it called?
I
What's
hope
that?
you keep going.
That's
I
right.
hope you keep pushing against it and that you
Mm,
have a strong enough self-belief to keep going. That's what I hope for that person in that situation. Just keep at it and keep working at it and don't give up and chase what's important to you.
mm. Oh, I had a thought. Hang on. Um, I was thinking too, when you're really creating something special, people follow you. Like, what's that? Is it a book, The 1,000 True Fans?
Hmm.
Right? And the idea is you don't need everybody to love you. You just need some people to absolutely love you.
Yes.
And that happens when you feel strong and passionately about your work and what you're doing.
All art is subjective.
Mhm.
There's no objective truth in art at all. Uh, it acts as a mirror, as you as the viewer, as you're looking at it, it reflects back at you what's going on in you.
Mm.
And this conversation that you have with your artwork is incredibly important. And I think the summary is here, don't you dare let anyone else devalue your work or tell you what it should and shouldn't be or what it means.
And if they do say that, you can just choose not to let it influence you. Because some
Well, I actually
people
love that conversation, that it
mm,
means something else for someone different. Like,
I do too.
you're actually
Yeah.
getting a bit of a window into who they are.
Mhm.
It's a really beautiful conversation to be having.
Mm. So if someone doesn't necessarily agree with your work, we invite you to become more curious about them.
What a beautiful place to finish our discussion on, Brie.
Agreed. Yeah, we have so many thoughts and opinions about our own art. It's so personal. It really is. And we're never going to convince everybody to love it like we do. So you just keep making it. That's all.
Make it, love it, share it,
Move on to the next one.
move on, and sit with
Absolutely.
your feelings when you feel disappointed in someone else's reactions, and move forward and keep going, and don't let it influence you.
Absolutely. That was really beautiful. I feel like I
What a
want to
lovely,
go
yeah.
photograph things now. I want to go make more art.
We flowed very, very easily through that session today, and
Hmm.
I hope you enjoyed it at home there.
All right. Well, I guess this is where we say goodbye. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Or you can hear from us the next time. I'll see you the next time, Len, because we do this where I can see your face. So that's it. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Well, wasn't that fun? As we close another episode of A Creative Affair, would you click on your podcast player and leave us a 5-star review and share with another passionate creative like yourself? Thanks. To find out more about our creative work and mentoring, visit Len at lenschool.com or me, Brie, at creativemindscoach.com.